ಕದವ ತೆರೆದರು ಮಂಗಳೂರ ಮಹನೀಯರು. ಹೆಸರ ಹಂಗಲು ಮೀರಿ ನಿಂತರು ಜ್ಞಾನ ದೇಗುಲ ಕಟ್ಟಲು. ಹೆಸರ ಹಂಗಲು ಮೀರಿ ನಿಂತರು ಜ್ಞಾನ ದೇಗುಲ ಕಟ್ಟಲು. ಜ್ಞಾನ ದೇಗುಲ ಕಟ್ಟಲು. ಚಟೂರ ಹಶಮಿ ಉಮಚಿ ಮುಕ್ತ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನ ಮಂದಿಯು ಗಟ್ಟಿ ಮತಿಯಲು ಮುಟ್ಟಿ ಮನಸ್ಸಿಗೆ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಸೆಲೆಯಲು ಬೆಳೆಸುತ್ತ. ಗಟ್ಟಿ ಮತಿಯಲು ಮುಟ್ಟಿ ಮನಸ್ಸಿಗೆ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಸೆಲೆಯಲು ಬೆಳೆಸುತ್ತ. ಜ್ಞಾನ ಸೆಲೆಯಲು ಬೆಳೆಸುತ್ತ. ಸರಿದಿದೆ ದೀಪ ಉರಿದಿದೆ ಮನದ ಕತ್ತಲೆ ಕಳೆದಿದೆ. ಆಸೆ ಅಕ್ಷರ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಸಾಗರ ಹರಿದು ಎಲ್ಲರ ಎಲ್ಲೆಗೆ. ಆಸೆ ಅಕ್ಷರ ಜ್ಞಾನ ಸಾಗರ ಹರಿದು ಎಲ್ಲರ ಎಲ್ಲೆಗೆ. ಹರಿದು ಎಲ್ಲರ ಎಲ್ಲೆಗೆ. ಪೊರೆಯನು ತೊರೆದು ಹೊಸ ಹುಟ್ಟರಿದು ಪಡೆದಿದೆ. ಹಳೆಯ ಪೊರೆಯನು ತೊರೆದು ಹೊಸ ಹುಟ್ಟರಿದು ಪಡೆದಿದೆ. ನಿತ್ಯ ನೂತನ ಮಾಡ ಚೇತನ ನಿತ್ಯ ನೂತನ ಮಾಡ ಚೇತನ. ಕಲಿತ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಪಾಲಿಗೆ ಕಲಿತ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಪಾಲಿಗೆ. ಸತತ ಕಲಿಯಲು ನಿತ್ಯ ನಲಿಯಲು ಎಲ್ಲರೊಂದಿಗೆ ಬೆರೆಯಲು. ಅರಿವಿನೂರಿಗೆ ತಿಳಿವ ತೇಜದಿ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ಹಾಕುವ ವೇಗದಿ. ಅರಿವಿನೂರಿಗೆ ತಿಳಿವ ತೇಜದಿ ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ಹಾಕುವ ವೇಗದಿ. ಹೆಜ್ಜೆ ಹಾಕುವ ವೇಗದಿ. ನಿಯತಂ ಕುರು ಕರ್ಮ 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 ನಿಯತಂ ಕುರು ಕರ್ಮ.
Good morning, dear friends. Greetings from Mangalore University. I am extremely delighted to note that the Department of Journalism, Political Science, Sociology and Internal Quality Assurance Cell of the University College Mangalore is organizing national webinar on a highly befitting theme, State and Civil Society Nexus today. Let me give you a very brief note on our journey for the past 5 months. We were listening to what you call lockdown, seal down, quarantine, something like that, which were unheard of before. We were reminded of the importance of several issues about which we were very skeptical in the past. Though there is large number of issues to address today, we are primarily focusing on the issues concerning our health, survival, mask, sanitizer, so-called social distance. I am not comfortable with this word social distance. And being hygienic are the mantras today, whether you like it or not. We have fought against several socio-political issues in the past to shun with social distance. Social distance was seen as anti-human being and contradictory to social change. Today, all of you know that the good human being is one who masks his face or her face and maintains social distance. The better word could be not social distance but physical distance. We are here to learn many new cultures in life, which is of course inevitable. I am sure you have understood what I am stressing on. COVID-19 pandemic is the new teacher amongst us, teaching all new journey of life. To me, it appears that COVID-19 pandemic has become the biggest equalizer of all times. It doesn't know the borders of any nation. It doesn't require any passport or visa to enter. Therefore, in that sense, it has emerged as the biggest equalizer of all time. It has opened up our inner eyes, and we started engaging in a process called soul searching by asking question, what am I and what am I up to? So in this context, let us pledge ourselves that we are here to protect others and let others protect us. The postmodern approach to life is not only pragmatic but also inevitable. I am reminded of a statement of World Health Organization. The poverty anywhere will constitute a danger to prosperity everywhere. The spirit of this statement is very much magnified by this COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, I am a student of commerce and management. I have been the student of human relations too. This has never and ever made me to be insensitive about my nation and the happenings in it. I do take interest in the day-to-day political life of people as well as the institutions in India. Our democratic political setup is that you cannot escape from the political processes of India. I have been closely watching the way both state and civil societies responded to the existing pandemic. It's highly appreciating, and I admire each and every one of the COVID-19 warriors. I must tell you that how proud I am to be here as an Indian as well as a responsible citizen to appreciate the way the pandemic was effectively and efficiently handled by both the state and the civil society. Above all, I must record it that the civil society has redefined the socio-political fabric in such a way that all castes, communities, class, gender and all other primary or less primary components of identity were pushed aside to protect the human beings. Indeed, a virus came to make us realize the fact that we need to change to live happily under one identity as human beings. As a matter of fact, there is a world of difference between a human being and being human. Today, we are all human beings. In the context of COVID-19 pandemic, we must try to become a better human being That's possible only when we demonstrate our genuine intentions through appropriate and timely actions. Today, nobody requires our sympathy. What they need is empathy. It is nothing but living in the shoes of others. Therefore, being universally compassionate has become the virtue of a better human being in the context of COVID-19 and also post-COVID-19 scenario. Through this interesting webinar, on behalf of my nation, let me appreciate and congratulate greater roles played by the civil societies these days. I'm extremely happy that a good friend of mine and a well-wisher of Mangalore University, as well as a well-known cephalogist, Professor Harish Ramaswamy, is invited to be the lead speaker in this webinar. I thank him profusely for accepting our invitation to be our lead speaker. I congratulate Dr. K.B. Shani, Dr. Latha, Dr. Gayathri and Dr. Veerabadrappa for organizing this wonderful webinar on the highly relevant and a vibrant theme. With this, I deem it my privilege to inaugurate this webinar and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you. Before I start on the subject of webinar, I would like to thank each and everybody for handling this COVID-19 crisis in a very systematic way, so that all of us can lead a very normal life. The staff of Department of Political Science, Journalism, Sociology and IQAC of University College have worked out a very relevant and interesting topic titled State and Civil Society Nexus Today. I am very happy to wish all the best to this unique webinar, because as all of us know, the civil society has been playing a very active role in its contribution to society, in lending a helping hand to the needy people in society. We as academicians and stakeholders in this society must join hands with the civil society in whatever way we can. So in that respect, I wish all the best to the organizers, Dr. R Shani, Dr. Latha, Dr. Gayathri, Dr. Veerabadrappa for their efforts. Let us have a very meaningful and successful academic session. You people can look forward to many more such webinars from our various academic departments of Mangalore University. It's an opportunity to learn in these changed times, so we must adapt ourselves to the new scenario. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Now we find here a kind of the community life and the kind of the society wherein everybody is seen as a member of the family, and that idea extends even to that of the court of a king. So therefore, it's a very different kind of concept, different kind of idea that I see. Now, finally, we would like to have a system, we would like to have a society where everybody is able to lead life happily with happiness and dignity. So, therefore, we need to have some space wherein we can speak about our problems, we can speak about our disappointments, we can speak about our frustrations. It doesn't mean that we want solution for everything. We have been, I consider myself to be very lucky, because I am born in an independent India. I was able to get a good education. I was able to get a good employment by the help of the state. Therefore, this is being enjoyed, and at the same time, the previous generation has paid a price for it. It has not come free for me. It has not fallen from the sky. So therefore, I have a small commitment to this particular society, and that is what we need to be worried about. I'm very happy that the Department of Political Science, Department of Journalism, Department of Sociology, and the Internal Quality Assurance Cell of my college thought it fit to have a discussion about civil society and the state at this juncture. And I'm also very glad that Professor Ramaswamy has been able to be with us and enlighten us.
We all know that the success of democracy depends upon the presence of both the state and civil society. Pandemics like COVID-19 have convinced us of the need for both these institutions to work hand in hand. We now have with us Dr. R Shani from the head of the Department of Journalism to introduce our resource person and also speak a few words on the theme of the webinar. Over to you, Shani.
Namaste, dear friends. I am Dr. Shani, one of the 4 organizers of this webinar of the University College Mangaluru. University College Mangaluru has always been in the front line in organizing both academic as well as extracurricular activities. Our webinar is one of those academic activities which believes in working together and maintaining relationship beyond artificial academic boundaries. Prior to my brief note on the webinar, let me thank our Honorable Vice-Chancellor, the Registrar, Principal, and all the participants for joining us and committing to work together to make our nation very unique. I'm entrusted with 2 primary responsibilities. One is introducing the theme and to introduce the lead speaker of this webinar. The chosen theme for the webinar today is contemporary and contextual. As most of us know, there has been a debate to measure the democratic process in the post-colonial societies. One of the parameters of measurement is the existence of the civil societies and recognizing their space. The mutual responsibilities of both state and civil societies are complementary to each other. One cannot exist without the other. However, the institutional behavior in general and the behavior of the state in particular came under the scanner during the last 5 months. There has been a mixed response on the way state handled the pandemic situation. Of late, people have realized the fact that the political institutions matter in a big way in a democratic setup like India. In the midst of what state in India has been doing, the civil society also came to frontline to reach the people than ever before. Both state and civil societies together face the challenges to break the chain of laws. Indeed, we are entering into a new pattern of life to which we need to get ourselves adjusted. A new civilization is emerged today, where we are not only living, but also living with a mission to break the continuity of a virus, which is considered to be deadly. However, to throw more on these issues, we have with us our lead speaker, Professor Harish Ramaswamy from Karnataka University, Dharwad. I know him for the last 25 years. He is one of the senior most professors of political science in Karnataka who has established a niche for himself, not only as a loved teacher, but also as a cephalogist in recent times. He's a teacher with a difference. He has made name both in academics as well as in supporting students for their education. With a rich experience of research and publications, he has emerged as one of the premier academicians. He has widely traveled across only to make himself a genuine human being, to be with all and to respect the existence of all. While in administration, he has used his office to help the poor employees who see him as a savior. He has organized several seminars and special lectures exclusively on the social themes, which is why Professor Harish is the right person to speak on the state and civil society. At present, he is the director of HRDC, editor of Journal of Social Science, executive editor of Journal Chanakya, reviewer of SAGE publication, and serving as a NAC committee member. He is the president's nominee of JNU Code. He has guided 22 PhD students and serving in various academic bodies. He has more than 65 publications and reviewed several books and journals. He has delivered lectures across the countries. He is one of the leading political analysts in India. Above all, he is a wonderful human being and friend and philosopher to many. Before I request Professor Harish Ramaswamy to speak, I have few instructions to the participant. Please mute your audio and turn off the video. Check the chat box for updates. Put your questions in the chat box. Feedback form link will be shared through chat box. Fill the feedback form to get the e-certificate. With this, I welcome Professor Harish Ramaswamy and request him to speak on the theme.
Thank you, Dr. Shani. If I may, how much time can I take? About 20, 25 minutes?
Yes, you can go till, 25 minutes you can take.
I think that should be fine.
Yeah, fine.
I'll try to limit within.
Afterwards, we can have our discussion.
Right. At the outset, I must thank the Honorable Vice-Chancellor of Mangalore University, the Registrar, the Principal of your University College, and all the 4 organizers from the Department of Political Science, Journalism, and then Sociology, IQAC, and my special thanks also goes to Dr. Dharma. He's a good friend, and whenever he calls, I can't say no. Now, limiting myself to the formality as short as I can, I would like to move on to make my presentation, because I thought webinar would cut down on these formalities, but technology has not only helped us to cut down, but it has, reinforced the formalities. I don't know when we are going to cut down on all these things. Anyway, I would like to divide my presentation, which the theme I have taken is Civil Society and the State Nexus in the Times of Crisis. I have divided my paper into 5 parts. A brief introduction, and then understanding of the civil society, both theoretically, and then defining the times of crisis in the context of COVID, and then civil society in the times of crisis and the state nexus, and then an evaluation. Now, talking about the civil society, the future role of civil society, Klaus Schwab, the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, said that civil society representatives play a critical role and a diverse set of roles in the societal development. In the last 2 decades, he said that there has been a difference which has gone beyond our assumptions. He also went further to say that this renewed focus and the essential contribution of civil society is now building a resilient global system along the side of government and business. Now, when he wrote this, perhaps he had not even thought in the faintest way that there would be a pandemic to loom. But when he made this remark, he was very clear that the civil society is going to have a very different role in the years to come. Now, if you go back to the theory, you find that civil society and the democratic political society have their roots in their classical liberalism. And it was Tocqueville who first discussed about civil society writings, especially as intermediaries between the state and citizens. And it was theorists like Gabriel Allman, Sidney Verba, who identified its role in politics. And they even went to say that civil society is the arena outside the family, the state, the market, where people associate and advance common interests. It was Robert Putnam, in his theory of social capital, argued that even non-political organizations in civil society are vital for democracy. However, these definitions are changing today. It is increasingly been recognized that civil societies are more sectors dominated by the NGOs and NVOs. This includes wider and more vibrant range of organized and unorganized groups as civil society actors. This, in fact, in my opinion, is blurring the boundaries between civil societies and other organizations. But however, it is allowing civil societies to collaborate with government agencies, business leaders, and finding and advocating solutions to global challenges like the pandemic, which is a new experience for all of us. Now, if you try to understand civil societies have always existed. If one is a good political thought student, he would understand that when Socrates spoke about resolving conflicts in a society through public arguments, or when Plato said the idea of civic virtues, or when Aristotle's idea that polis was an association of associations, or when Romans said civilis, or even when Locke spoke about the powerful society, or when Hobbes talked about community, they were all making a reference to civil society in different forms. But it was Hegel who actually altered this completely. He gave rise to a modern liberal understanding of civil society as a form of market society as opposed to the institutions of modern state. To him, civil society was a system of needs in the realm of economic relationships as they exist in the modern industrialist capitalist society. That's the reason why we sometimes also identify that civil societies emerged at a particular period of capitalism. In the more recent times, World Bank has a better understanding or defining civil society. It says civil society refers to a wide array of organizations, community groups, non-governmental organizations, labor unions, indigenous groups, charitable organizations, faith-based organizations, professional associations, and foundations. Now, what I want you to observe here is the kind of expanding connotation that is being given to civil society. Now, the term became popular in the 1980s, especially in political and economic discussions, when it started to be identified with non-state movement, where defying authoritarian regimes became very prominent, especially in the Central, Eastern European, and Latin American countries. So civil society, in a way, was recognized as the third sector after government and commerce. When mobilized, it has the power to influence the actions of elected policymakers and business. Now, this must tell us very clearly as to what is the nature of civil society and what it is and what it does and how it is evolving in response to both the technological developments and the more nuanced changes within the societies, which is hard to quantify. However, if you try to understand what is the size of civil society today, there is one study which tries to tell you that civil societies across 40 countries today represent about 2.2 trillion in operating, this is dollars in operating expenditures. And it employs about 54 million full-time equivalent workers and has a global volunteer workforce of nearly 350 million. Of course, one can subject this to verification because the number can change. Now, this figure, in a way, looks like, it is crossing the domestic gross domestic product of nearly big 6 countries. Therefore, the academics described it as the volunteer land. It's a new word that they coined. It is called the volunteer land. Now, if you look at the responsibilities the civil societies have taken in the recent past, it starts from holding institutions to account, promoting transparency, raising awareness of societal issues, delivering services like education, health, food security, implementing disaster management, and its preparedness and emergency responses, bringing expert knowledge and experience to shape policies and strategies, giving power to the marginalized, gender discriminated, and violence against women. It works with local governments, helps people access relief measures down to every rural and urban ward, fills the gap in government's responses, and encourages citizens' engagement. And it also deals with corruption and human rights issues. So by these activities, what they are trying to do is to ensure the well-being of the people. Their motto seems to be, if the government does not listen, we have to make them listen. The role of civil society thus do not stop at putting pressure on the government, but to reach as many areas as possible where the government is unable to reach, which is very, very important. This is exactly what it tried to do during the pandemic. Now look at the civil societies. They have even gone to the extent of using transparency and accountability mechanisms to monitor the government's work and to make sure that the state resources are well used. They realize that they need to proactively find gaps and help fill those gaps. Thus, the whole understanding of civil society in these years is a constantly enlarging and a changing one. Now, let me talk about what is a times of crisis in the context of COVID. Now, crisis is a Greek word, which means that any event that leads to an unstable and dangerous situation affecting an individual, group, community, or governments, or even the whole society is considered to be a crisis. Perhaps the ongoing COVID pandemic has shown us very clearly that this is undoubtedly a crisis, and we have not seen anything like this in our lifetime. So, when we try to understand how this crisis has affected the governments around us and the societies, I have some of the observations which I have made. One thing it showed us very clearly that there are limitations to governments. It has also shown us how government's unpreparedness can cause pain. It has also shown us how the updating of the data is important for the governments to take decisions. It has also shown us the limitations of governments to control the new social media and their fake news bastions. It has also shown us how the public health system, like many other institutions of government, have not only collapsed, but are incompetent to handle this crisis. It has also shown us how the government's economic and other supportive packages, without monitoring, leads to mismanagement and derails the deliveries, corrupt, political, bureaucratic nexus. It has also shown us how government's dependency on bureaucracy in times of crisis increases. Now, this does not mean that everything was bad. And I'm certainly not trying to give you an impression that everything was bad during COVID. The government and their structures are working well in some areas, especially if I would like to appreciate, if you like it, police and the health subsystems have been functioning quite well. In some other places, the government itself is asking for the civil society for help, especially in identifying the kind of corruption that was found in the name of COVID. Also volunteers to work for COVID and for the rapid health tests, etc. Now, given the enormity of the intervention required, the government could not do a lot of work alone. Like the expansion of needed beds or the health infrastructure, governments had to depend on civil societies, industries, and other agencies. What this means is that while civil society organizations can take the responsibility for one or more areas to support government initiatives and fully ensure the well-being of the people there, the civil society has also realized that they cannot replace the vast role of government in facing the crisis head-on. However, in my opinion, it is in the area of working with local governments and decentralized institutions that were already existing that both governments and civil societies have failed. Perhaps that is the reason why we went on to give slogans like local before global or vocal for local became. Now, if they only had used these institutions in an effective way, perhaps we could have reduced the effects of COVID-19 and probably, the threat of COVID could have been reduced. Now, for any reason, COVID should not be taken lightly. It's a high-risk area, undoubtedly. The state and civil society had to work in a nexus during this crisis to ensure certain things. They could not have ignored the most vulnerable, who are also unfortunately poor. They had to work for their benefit. Nor could they have ignored the need for essential services, which absolutely, in any condition, will have to continue to work. They had to build systems and mechanisms for safe delivery of services and saving lives. They had to motivate public servants, health workers, and also the tertiary levels of help, because those who were working at the tertiary level also needed some kind of a moral support. And there was also need to give people and the health workforce the economic incentive and moral support, without which we would not have seen the kind of success that we are seeing today. Even though this had to be primarily done by the governments, it was the nexus between the state and the civil society that had a huge role to play, and it could play it very well. But let us remember, all these would not have been possible if there was no marriage or understanding between the state and the civil society. Now, if this is what I wanted to explain to you about how the civil societies have been functioning at the time of crisis along with the state partnering, I would like to now concentrate on what was the nexus between the two. How did they function? Now, the current COVID crisis poses several problems for development in general, not in the least the health sector. There are several ways in which civil society can play its role in the times of crisis, this with or without the nexus of state. Now, the first thing that civil societies had to worry was about the asymmetry of power relations between the executive and the accountability mechanisms, and also the power centralization in this hour of crisis. Perhaps you have all read in newspapers and also in articles, academicians discussing how it affected the center-state relations, interstate relations, how the states behaved, how the center behaved at certain point of time during COVID. Now, civil society had to ensure as a watchdog and avoid the demagogues benefiting from these crisis situations, despite the fact that in close proximity. They had to build new alliances with those who were willing to support their social accountability initiatives. They had to explore new digital platforms for civic engagements like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, to have a meaningful effect on the society. One of the studies shows that there was almost an increase of 50% in messaging and also doubling of video calls. Now, they also had to group themselves to monitor the local spread of virus on one hand, and on the other, organize neighborhood assistance. After the COVID outbreak, I also got to read that there were more than 200 instances of crowdsources mapped on Ushdi platform, which have been launched by these groups, filing reports of accountability issues, matters related to the spread of virus, not only in India, but also in various other countries, including the African nations. Now, some civil society groups even reported on black markets of sales of food, politicization of AIDS, unregulated increases in food prices, and police brutality, and likewise. Now, apart from all this, there were a few other things that they were needed to attend to win this battle. The first among them was the containment effort. They had to slow down or halt the spread of the virus. They had to prevent or reduce the non-medical effects of pandemic, which includes economic breakdown, migration of workers, and the economy as a whole to keep running. Now, ensuring the recovery of economy and other related issues like inflation, price rise, as quickly as possible had to be controlled, because the damages sustained by these economic ripples would, in the long run, hurt any government or even the country. Now, the need of the hour was not just for one country or one state getting out of this crisis, but it needed an effort by all the countries simultaneously, because any one link would threaten the other. What I mean by this is, it is not like a disease that is controlled in India and not controlled in US or not controlled in Pakistan. You had to control simultaneously in almost all the countries. And if you don't do it, then the problem is it could even come back. Now, further, the civil society also had to arrest the social economic ripple effect by mitigating fear, stigma, panic caused by COVID, which is critical to containing of this pandemic. While the work was done by most of the civil society organizations like NGOs, NPOs, VIVOs were absolutely crucial, one must also realize that the success of this was dependent on the relationship of civil society with the local authorities and the state. One classical example that we can remember is what happened in Delhi. The way the Aam Aadmi Party used to accuse the BJP or Congress, they all came together to serve the society there. Now, in this context, we should know that civil society organizations are important sectors that can bridge the gap between knowledge and practice. In fact, the pandemic revealed how unequal global systems are. And therefore, we had to work for a new social contract to make these organizations the collective expression of citizens' interest in a democracy. There were four important components that these civil societies had to build this new social contract. One was their deep connect with the spatial and sectoral issues. Number two, their engagement with closely knit communities. Number three is their borderless nature. And the fourth one is their ability to develop communication strategies in different vernaculars. Because all these things prove to be an asset in fighting against this pandemic, because you could easily understand those societies by understanding these issues. Now, civil society actors and the role in another way, where undeserved communities was completely ignored by the governments. And this is something unprecedented that the civil societies played. Now, civil societies played an important role in reducing hardship faced by these undeserved communities, which in most cases were not noticed by the state itself. It could be the problem of migrant laborers or the hospitals treating the patients with other health issues. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the form of civil society and state cooperation that was on display during pandemic could also provide one with the inspiration or the model of proactive partnerships. What I believe is that we need to do more research in this area, because once the pandemic is gone, perhaps we could put through our research students to look into the kind of relationships and develop some kind of a model as to how these partnerships work in different states. Now, if you look at the future of these civil societies in the post-pandemic society, I have a belief that these organizations and this nexus is going to be fundamental to build a right-based post-pandemic world. The alliances between them, that is the state and the civil society, will definitely help us to be effective and impactful only in a decentralized organizational context. I'm sure many questions will be raised on this issue, because I do not believe that in a centralized top-down responding mechanisms, the civil society could have succeeded as much as it succeeded in a decentralized society. Now, if I have to conclude my discussion, my presentation, I would say that the public health emergency, as explained so far, has hit the poorest and the marginalized communities, as we all know. The hardest was exposing the gap between the rich and the poor, sending us back in decades in our progress towards more equal world. We make a claim that we are in equal world, but I believe, I noticed, I don't know about others, that I found that there were a lot of inequalities that we could find out when this pandemic came around. In the long term, as Oxfam has already predicted, the ability to mitigate the impact of these relies heavily on the ability of civil society to maintain its role and responsibility in giving a voice to the communities. We have given them the right to vote, we have given them the economic support, but we have not given them the voice to share their voice as stakeholders. Now, closing the civic space and constraints on movement, which is already happening, and increasingly authoritarian policies of state in many countries, I don't exclude India for that matter, is likely to make the environment for advocacy and accountability for civil societies an extremely difficult task, coupled with dwindling resources. This, I am afraid, may even result that the civil societies will collapse in many countries. In some countries, it has already collapsed, and it is likely to collapse in many more countries. While this may be one of the most difficult environments for the civil society to work, it is also critical for it to work and avoid the states from exploiting surveillance. Surveillance is a new instrument in the hands of the state, and it can use the data as they wish. And that is a danger that we have to worry, because there's a question of privacy on one side, and then the surveillance issues. They have started in the name of pandemic, and we don't know how it is going to end up. Now, if I have to conclude, I would simply say that civil societies would help us to create a more equitable and just society. Civil society has not lost the possibility to influence the states. Let us remember this. It has not lost the possibility to influence the states or the governments. But if they have lost, one can force them to change their policy. That is why we believe in the voice of civil society for a brighter future for all. But state has to partner with it, whether we like it or not, because as states are also, we should know, is the worst enemy of civil society. It is a kind of a necessary evil with which we have to live. I think I have tried to give you a contour of how the civil society and the state nexus worked out during the pandemic situation. And I think I have done justice by taking about 15-20 minutes to speak, because I would be more interested in the discussions and learning from this participation. Thank you very much. Once again, I thank all the organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that insightful and in-depth analysis of the topic, the state and civil society nexus today. And your talk has really raised some queries. I think we could take up these queries for discussion. The first question is, in the eve of emergence of civil societies, does the state retain its original character?
Yeah. Now, this is a question which we should remember in the context of how the states are growing stronger and the civil society is becoming weaker. So I would say that the states have changed in spite of the emergence of civil society, but they have not become weak, they have become stronger. On the contrary, the existence of civil societies should have been a partnership, but that partnership is not succeeding through and through. That's how I look at it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that reply. The next question we have is, does the civil society represent the plural character of Indian society? I think this question is being asked keeping in mind the civil society groups that we have in India. So, do they represent the plural?
It's a difficult question, because when we talk about civil society, we tend to believe that it is inclusive, but it is not in reality. We all know it. And the second question is it pluralistic? I'm afraid it is not. Most of the time we see that the pluralistic sense is kept away from these civil societies. And that is the danger. And that is how the state also would like it to be, so that they can exploit them.
Okay, so then the next question is, when we consider the relationship between state and civil society, it keeps changing with the changing circumstances and situations. So to what extent the civil societies require the support of the state for their meaningful existence?
And that's exactly what I concluded in the end. You can't do away with state. A civil society by itself cannot run the state. And the state by itself alone cannot run the society. But it has already shown in history that the states have been able to run societies without the existence of civil societies. So you find that, on the contrary, the civil societies need the state. Not so much so, the state needs the civil society.
Yes, sir. One more question we have, sir. It's coming up in the chat box. With due respect to the civil society, very often people say civil society favors castes, communities, etc. What is your opinion on this?
This is true. I can't say no, because from the sociological perspective, if you try to see, I can quote instances where the civil societies have respect to the, let us say, an atrocity on a woman of upper caste in a different way, including the media, the way they have responded to the atrocities on a downtrodden in a very different way. So I will have to agree with them.
Very true, sir. Very true. Now, if we think about the role of civil society in the pandemic situation, very often most of them have worked in support of the state system. But at the same time, they've also had a number of challenges. How do they confront these challenges?
Yes, I had an occasion to listen to some of the webinars and also some of the discussions with officers who were involved in this. 3-4 things that I would like to just bring up. The first thing that they suffered in organizing the whole thing is there are no rules and regulations laid down. They had to go back to an archaic kind of a law that was existing and then follow certain modifications within it. Although legally they could not do it, they had to accommodate it. Number 2, they had the problems of deliveries because of the lack of data and the kind of instruments and technologies that they wanted. They had to forfeit in several cases that they were unable to do it. And the third one is there was a lot of bureaucracy. And this was also hampering them in certain ways. Of course, I heard that there were some bureaucrats who were much more liberal in their attitude in managing with these things. And there were also blunders committed by some of them. One such case I found was in Belgaum. A Tahsildar put the patients with COVID symptoms, people who did not have any symptoms in place. And I don't know how he thought he could put them together. Such mistakes were also committed. But these are challenges because, the reason which I already told you is that there was no preparedness for most of these institutions. They did not anticipate, despite the fact that given a clue way back 2006 and 2013. I don't know why the states did not think that they should be prepared for this kind of a pandemic. Perhaps they never thought that pandemic would be of this magnitude, and that's why they suffered. But otherwise, in spite of the limitations and the changes that we require, especially the systemic changes, the legal and the law frameworks that we need to change, I think they have done fairly well. I would agree that the states have done fairly well.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much for all those apt replies to the queries that your talk has really evoked a good response among participants also. This webinar has actually received a very overwhelming response. Nearly 308 participants have registered for this webinar. I now request Dr. Veerabadrappa, the coordinator of Internal Quality Assurance Cell of our college, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to all. On behalf of University College in Mangalore, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to all those who have contributed the state and Nexus today. I express my thanks to our Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Subramania, for delivering the inaugural address for this webinar. Thank you, sir. I express my heartfelt thanks to our Registrar, Raju Mogaveera, for his warm greetings for the success of this webinar. Thank you, sir. I express my heartfelt thanks to the resource person, Harish, Professor, Department of Studies and Research and Political Science, Karnatak University, Dharwad, for gracing this occasion and delivering very informative lecture on the topic, the state and civil society Nexus today, and sharing his valuable thoughts. Thank you, sir. I express my heartfelt thanks to our beloved principal, Dr. Uday Kumar, sir, for his message, encouragement, and support in conducting this webinar. Thank you, sir. I express my heartfelt thanks to organizers, Dr. Latha Pandith, HOD of Political Science, Dr. R Shani, HOD of Journalism, Dr. Gayathri, HOD of Sociology, in organizing this webinar. I express my thanks to the Bharti Pillar of Computer Science Department and to Guru Prasad of Journalism Department for their involvement and technical support. I express my thanks to our student, Mr. Sudhindra, for his technical support. I express my thanks to all the participants of various colleges for their overwhelming response and active participation in this webinar. I express my thanks to all the teaching and non-teaching staff. I express my thanks to one and all who supported directly or indirectly in conducting this webinar. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Harish, sir. It has been a very fantastic experience listening to your talk, and it has really evoked a good response among our participants also. Thank you for sparing your very valuable time. Dear participants, I thank you all. The feedback link is available in the chat box. Please fill that to get your e-certificates in the next 5 days. Thanks to one and all, and have a good day. Sir, thank you very much for sparing your valuable time. Thank you.